Danny Segura for MMAJunkie.com. I'm joined by American Top Team coach Mike Brown. Mike, first of all, how's it going? How was Florida? We know you had a very busy week. How are you doing, and have you recovered from all that work?
Everything's great here. It's good to have the entertainment back on. 3 fights in a week was nice, man. Good to see everybody back to work.
Yeah, for sure. It felt good to have MMA back. So just for clarity, I want to discuss some things about the cornering, and you gave us some great insight the last time we spoke, which was prior to the trio of events that happened with the UFC over in Jacksonville. As far as the fighters that you coached, who were some of the fighters that you coached, just so people know kind of where were you at in what fighters you helped out for those events?
I was with first was Charles Rosa. He had a tough go with Bryce Mitchell. Bryce was just a step ahead of him, and he wasn't able to get to the positions where he was strong in, and it was kind of a tough night. But he's back in the gym and working hard, and I see he's motivated by it, which is really a great sign. Then I was with Andrei Arlovski. He's still continuing to be the most winning heavyweight in UFC history.
Yeah.
It's a nice stat to have. Longevity, 20 years going. Pretty damn impressive. And Christoph Jotko, who's coming off a win over a very tough Eric Anders. So it was a good week.
Yeah, for sure. And we discussed how entering these events, you said the lack of crowd might influence and might change the way MMA goes down, not only from a viewing standpoint, but the actual fights. You said we might get some different fights without the crowd, which is obviously one of the biggest things during these climate with COVID-19. Did it meet your expectations? How was cornering a fight and working that without a crowd? How much did it alter your work?
I really enjoyed it, man. It was great. It was nice to. It was great to be able to, hear everything that was being said. I think the athlete was more in tune with the coach. I think that there was a lot less stress, which is nice. It's something to be said about the buzz of a big crowd, and that's a beautiful thing. And there's, 1,000 upsides, but sometimes it's nice to have a quiet arena and a low key setting where very low stress. And I would say that's just the best way to describe it. Easy going. It's like practice.
And even before come fight night, like fight week was reduced a lot, obviously, without media obligations, open workouts, all the fan stuff. We had a virtual media day, but that doesn't compare to a regular UFC fight week. How much did that help fighters? Because often it's talked about how much that is a distraction, especially with the fighters trying to make weight.
The fighters loved it. To be honest, it's a lot less work. It's less stress, it's less work. But on the other side, it's not as good for the fans, so the fans are missing out. That's a big part of it. It's not as good for the business, so who wouldn't like less work, less interviews, less this, less that, less running around, less appearances. That's great, but at the end of the day, it's probably not the best thing for business.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to have interaction with the fans, good to have obviously people in the crowds, gate sales, yada, 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 all kinds of revenue being generated. But as far as stress and things you got to do, we're in a day later. We got a lot less obligations. There's no fans around. There's no, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just, it's a lot more quiet. It's easy going. You're kind of in and out of things a lot quicker. And some people really love that. Really love the being surrounded by fans. It's a really big part of it, and it gives a lot of energy to a lot of people. So it's good and bad for different reasons.
Yeah. And I'm curious, what was the energy like in the locker room? Because I mean, you see the fights, you see the crowd, right? Like there's like sort of an anticipation built. With this, it's a little bit different, right? Maybe not anticlimactic. I don't know what exactly would the word would be to describe it, but what was it like moments before, stepping out there and being backstage?
It feels a bit like practice, like a step above practice. Obviously, the stakes are higher, but uh, it's definitely less stressful. It doesn't. You're not feeling the weight of the outcome as much. There's a giant weight of the outcome when you're competing, and that I think the crowd like exemplifies it. It you have all these people screaming, and you just realize the magnitude of what's going on, and winning and losing it means so much. It means the amount of money you're going to make. It's about what your future money will bring in. It's about your ego. It's about your health. I mean, there's a lot on the line every time you step out there, and I think with a big crowd and the locker room full, you really get a sense of that. In this situation where we arrive at the venue, there's kind of one other guy in front of you in the locker room. They're trying to get him out of there as quickly as possible. So right when you get in, they're gone. So it's not like a crowded locker room where you're seeing people going in and out, people coming in crying, people going in like psyching themselves up, people coming in, bloodied, battered and crying or cheering. It's this ton of emotion in the locker room, which you don't have in this situation either, because they're not allowing the locker rooms to be full like normal. Normally, especially if you're not like a main event, you could have everybody. You could have the entire red corner in your locker room in a given night. So, that was not the case in this situation. So a lot less people around, the locker rooms were empty, and a different experience, but
Yeah.
But fun.
Yeah. And we talked about prior to the events how like, the lack of crowd and everything that involves hosting an event with this climate of COVID-19 could benefit some fighters, or the fighters that feed off the crowd could, be a detriment to them. Did you notice any difference among the fighters that you trained? Did anyone specifically like enjoy sort of the silence and the calmness of the events, or was maybe one fighter like kind of like wanting more in that interaction with the fans and all that?
Andrei specifically liked it. Andrei, wow,
the veteran.
Yeah, the vet dude who's seen it all. This guy has seen every show, every event, the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. He's seen it all, and he was like, "Hey, I like this. I really, I like this." I mean, he's not the most outgoing of people, so I can understand why. But he liked how it was quiet. But I could see in a weird way where this could have played a little effect on Rose's fight. Even the smallest of margin. I don't think this is by any means, be enough to change an outcome of a fight, especially one that was once so one-sided. But a guy who like Rosa, who's got an excellent gas tank, and a lot of times he actually kind of relies on people, expelling a lot of energy and coming on later in a fight, which is what he does quite often.
Mm-hmm.
I could see this being a small factor where, the opponent he doesn't have the stress and the crowd, screaming. So he's able to relax a little more, not squeeze so hard on some like near submissions that he might have. Like he's smart enough to know, and doesn't have the adrenaline to push him, further than he should. He was able to stay calm, cool, and relaxed, and didn't seem to tire in the least bit. Even though it's a guy who, that's a big part of Rose's game, is usually wearing guys out, keeping a high pace. Literally, you watch him look in nearly every fight. He literally will give people a choke allow them to squeeze and then attack when they're done. You know, it's not a great game plan. I don't like that he does it, but he does it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, literally every fight he does it. You know, I've even said this one. I'm like, hey, don't give him the head nom choke, huh? Like joking. I don't even care if he does. I know he's going to do it. You know? But I think people are getting pretty keen to it now.
Yeah, that's interesting because Rosa, and I mean this in a good way, he's a showman. You know, I mean, how many fight of the nights has he logged in within the UFC? I just remember his first fight with Dennis Seaver on short notice, right? The one with Shane Burgos, which recently went down, and I saw him come up through CFA. I don't know if you remember CFA down in South Florida when I was living down there. So yeah, he's always been a guy that puts on exciting fights, and that's usually paired up with fans going wild, right? So that's pretty interesting. So all right, so you get out of the locker room, you go into the actual fight, and a lot was made about the actual cornering. Like we had fighters, like for example, Greg Hardy, say like, "Oh, I was listening to DC commentate and say some of the things that I should be doing, and I actually started doing them." How was it like cornering and giving advice? Like, did you have to like sort of measure your level of voice so you don't have to give anything away to the other fighter? Like, what was that experience like once the actual fight rolled through?
Yeah, you got to be a little more strategic because you know everybody's hearing things so clearly. They don't have to like sift through voices. You know, that kind of everyone hears what's going on both sides. Yeah, what was? Oh, that was really interesting. That was maybe the weirdest part is that you could hear the commentary very clear. And specifically with the Rosa fight, it was like, you know, things weren't going our way. And so, of course, they're like, they're being critical in a way, and maybe rightfully so. But it was like, oh, damn, you know, you could kind of hear them talking about the fight, and it was a little bit strange. And even at one point, I remember hearing, I don't remember who it was, it might have been John Anik or somebody, when he came back, I heard him talking to them saying like, hey, I could hear everything you guys are saying. Like they didn't even realize how you could hear it. Yeah. But like somebody went to get a drink or go to the bathroom or something, when they took their headphones off, and they don't realize how loud they're talking because they got headphones on. But the corner could hear everything the commentary was saying, like crystal clear. I don't know about the fighters because it's a little bit chaotic in there, but the corners definitely could. So it was, and obviously Greg did. So
yeah,
Greg was also hearing what the corners were saying. So that was probably the strangest part of it, you know. And it could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing depending on how critical they were.
Right, of course. Yeah, and that was something that was talked about a lot. Like a lot of fighters were like, yeah, I could hear, you know, not only my corner, but my opponent's corner and the commentators. Do you think I mean, because these are all new events, like this is all like the protocol, everything is new. And I assume like and they did do some adjustments to it. It's a sort of a work in progress, and they're going to keep changing things as they go. Do you think that should be addressed? Or how do you feel about that? Because it is a new layer to the game, right?
What do you mean? What should be addressed?
The fact that, you know, the fighters can hear commentators. Should like maybe their voice be muffled a little bit, or should that be kept in?
Nah, I mean, come on, you got to have some thick skin, right? Like,
right.
This is not a big deal. It was just it was a weird feeling, but I don't think this is a problem. You know, it's you know, hopefully their commentary is honest. I mean, the only time maybe there's a way to look at it, and I might have heard somebody even mention something to that effect, because sometimes the fighters have a pre-fight meeting with the commentary and even kind of tell them a little bit of the game plan, right?
Okay.
So this could actually, in some weird way, factor in if they're talking about so-and-so, Edson Barbosa told me he is going to come hard early and chop those legs down, then this could be a factor. So, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe this is. Yeah. So I didn't really think of it too far ahead, but I guess I guess you can't tip your cards too low in this situation.
Yeah, it's all very, very new and bizarre, I guess. And another factor interesting, apart from the judges, apart from, you know, the corners. I mean, the commentators, the judges was a thing. We were texting, you know, a few days ago, and we are saying how some of the decisions were kind of funky. And we know that whenever there's a big hit or a big move, the crowd goes wild. And that might or might not influence the judges. Do you think the lack of crowd might have influenced the decisions that we saw that, throughout the week?
I mean, you would think that they would be more accurate without the crowd, right?
Yeah.
You would think that you would have, less fan reaction. You would think it would be more of an unbiased decision, but the cards were kind of all over the place, right?
It seemed most people disagreed with the, like, for example, I think the most controversial ones with Marlon Vera, Chito Era, against Song Yadong. A lot of people thought Marlon Vera won and Song Yadong got away with the victory. A lot of people thought Edson Barbosa defeated Dan Ige and he lost. There was another one that I'm trying to think right now, but can't come to mind. Another funky decision.
And sometimes it was just like bad, even though the right fighter maybe won, but it was maybe just you knew the scoring was off, oh, there's no way that he won all 3 rounds. Like you saw a lot of that too, where
Claudia Gadelha versus Angela Hill. That's the fight that was coming to me.
Now see, I didn't watch every minute of the Edson. No, I watched every minute of the Edson fight. I didn't see every minute of the Chico Vera fight against Song Yadong. And what was the Gadelha? I did not see that fight because I'm like cornering and coaching, and it's like, so I'm catching. I caught most of the Chico Vera fight, but if you don't watch every second of the fight, obviously you can't be judging the score.
Interesting.
I actually thought Edson had won. I thought it was 2 rounds to 1. I think that he lost I think he won 1 and 2 and had lost the third, I thought. He hurt him. He kind of like dropped him in both rounds. One, he hurt him, and the second, I think he actually kind of pulled guard, but it was because he was hurt to the body. Is the reason he did it. I think that was enough to secure those rounds. And then, I mean, a great indicator of who you thought won is always, for me, because, I mean, emotions is a big factor. And anytime it's close, I know it's subjective and it could be anybody's round. I always go to MMAdecisions.com. It's an excellent website.
Yep, it is.
Where you just get all the, journalists who, I mean, these are all people who their life is to study the sport and fans of the sport. And you get a general consensus of who should have won that fight.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, I guess we're going to get a deeper pool the more the UFC has events. And if more funky decisions come up, I think maybe there's something to it, and there needs to be something looked at as far as how much the crowd has an impact on the judges. But yeah, that's all interesting stuff. As far as the experience itself, I mean, now that that's done with, any learning experience that you might take from this, like things that you would do differently come another event without a crowd, and everything that involves regarding having an event with COVID-19.
Not really. It was nice. It was smooth, but maybe I don't know. I think it was as I expected. It was easy going. I mean, it was kind of an easier week than a normal fight week. It was a lot less work for us, I would say.
Yeah. So now that that's done with, let's talk about a fighter that we were just talking about a little bit ago, Andrei Arlovski. That guy has 7 lives. It just seems that whenever you think he's done, he comes back with a win. Defeated Felipe Lins, who's a very good fighter. I believe he won the PFL tournament in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. What's sort of the secret there? Because I mean, it just seems that whenever you count him out, he just bounces right back.
Still getting better, man. Still improving. Still. 20 years of fighting at the highest level, 20 years of fighting at a UFC, UFC level fights. He was he started in the UFC literally like 20 years ago. And he's still getting better, still improving, still adding ideas, techniques, training methods to his game. It's really impressive. One of the most open-minded fighters that I work with, one of the guys who is listens to the coaches and is willing to try anything asked of him, and that's impressive for a guy who's been who's so experienced. He's done so much. And one of the most successful guys. He's a UFC champion. So that's really impressive, and it means a lot. That says a lot about him and his character and his mental strength, I think.
Yeah. Being open-minded in this game seems to be one of the main keys for longevity, right? Because we saw Alistair Overeem like a few days after, right? Or was it on the same card? I don't even remember. All the events are blending in, but he's a guy that's also, like Andrei Arlovski, had a lot of longevity in the game. He's been fighting also for since the 90s, and he's changed his style a lot and has hopped around teams a lot and seek new knowledge. I don't know if you agree with that. It seems that being open-minded in this game is the key to sticking around for quite some time.
He's very impressive, I think. Maybe more than anybody, that it has changed his style, changed his game time and time again. He adapted, and now he's a little older, and obviously his body type has changed many times also, and he's adapted every time. And now he's got like a modern day MMA style where he's using the most kind of like modern MMA techniques to win fights strategically, and that's impressive for a guy who was, K1 world champion. I don't know how many years ago. This was forever ago now, but he's stayed at the top for a long time, and to see him using wrestling wrist rides and it's just kind of modern MMA stuff that you see with a lot of lighter guys using too. Not, you don't see a lot of heavier guys using the stuff he's using. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's. I feel like he's super underrated as far as that goes. Like a fighter that's been able to change his style and maintain a sort of a relevant style as the game has progressed. Is just very few fighters are able to do that, and that seems to be working for him. I mean, he's bouncing right back. So one more question around that before I ask you sort of about what's coming up. How was the swab test, by the way? Because it seemed like a lot of people were having a tough time with it, but our own John Morgan just took it like a champ. So kind of getting all different angles here. How was that?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. For me, it was much worse than I expected. And I thought it was going to be bad. I don't know what it is. I don't know if some people's nose is different. I don't know if some people that administer the test are going deeper than others. But for me, they were so deep inside my head, it felt like something shouldn't be there. They're going way up underneath your eyeball with some. I mean, it hurt. It was uncomfortable, and it felt like this shouldn't be up there. I was kind of squirming. You got to get that out of there. Help me here, But then other people were like, oh, it was no big deal. So I don't know if some people, they're not going as deep as others. But for me, it was extremely uncomfortable, I don't look for, I have to take another one tomorrow, actually. Ooh. For the Titan. There's a Titan show this weekend locally.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to go to the Titan show. We got a couple guys on that. But
yeah, I'm guessing you're going to be doing a lot of that with all the fighters you're cornering.
It's not exciting, but no, I did enjoy that. That's for sure.
Yeah. So as far as the UFC fighters, will you be in Amanda Nunes corner for UFC 250?
I'll be there. Yeah.
Cool. Is that the next one, or is there anyone else?
Well, I mean, this weekend coming up, I have Danny Sabatello and Sal Guerrero. They're two younger prospects that we have, but both they're very tough fighters, both with wrestling backgrounds, but a couple of our best prospects.
Okay, nice. And Florida opened up, right? I believe was it yesterday or today, right? Everything is back to normal. Gyms are, I know there's certain precautions in mind, but for the most part, most businesses open up. How are you sort of handling things? And are you kind of some people jumping right back into normal life or easing your way back into it?
Well, I mean, we've been training nonstop the whole way through. I mean, it's been a lot smaller It's been limited to those fighters in the UFC with fights coming up, which is still a decent number for us. But we've got no general students. None of the pros that didn't have immediate fights come or scheduled at the time haven't been coming in. So it's a much smaller group. But I've been in there, and in some ways it's been more time consuming because we're sometimes splitting practices up and doing 2 practices so that we make smaller groups and get less exposure with one another. So for honestly, for the coaches at ATT, it hasn't changed a ton. We've been kind of busy, and ever since this began, ever since the outbreak really took off and we started making changes, there's always been a UFC fight 3-4 weeks away. So that means somebody's always fighting, and that means somebody's always training. So, we've been in the gym just with a lot less people.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I recently spoke to Dan Lambert, and yeah, you guys are going to remain, despite the state opening, you guys are going to remain close to sort of the general public, just allow the pros that have booked fights, continue to use the facility. So yeah, I guess we'll see how everything turns out in Florida in the next few weeks and months with the reopening. All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate the time, man. Great work through all these events. Good luck with the future swab test as well. I know that's a tough thing. It looks like a nightmare, man. I don't know if I want to cover any events under that circumstance, but luckily we have John Morgan, who's braver than me as far as that's concerned. So we don't have to worry about that.
Not something I like doing, that's for sure.
Yeah, it looks pretty bad, and if you say it's worse than what it looks, I can't imagine what it's like. But
yeah,
I appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate the time, and best of luck working the events this week.
All right, thanks, Danny. Take care, man.